Could have been more shocking, I didn't know. Your tongue is too sharp for a dervish, the judge said. When something needs to be said, I'll say it even if the whole world grabs me by the neck and tells me to keep quiet. This was met with a frown from the judge, but then he shrugged dismissively. Well, whatever, he said. In any case, you are the man we need. We were just talking about the splendor of our city. You must have seen many places. Is there a place more charming than Baghdad? Softly, his gaze moving from one man to another, Shams explained, there is no question Baghdad is a remarkable city, but no beauty on earth lasts forever. Cities are erected on spiritual columns. Like giant mirrors, they reflect the hearts of their residents. If those hearts darken and lose faith, cities will lose their glamour. It happens, and it happens all the time. I couldn't help but nod. Shams of Tabriz turned to me, momentarily distracted from his thoughts, with a friendly flicker in his eyes. I felt them on me like the heat of a sweltering sun. That was when I clearly saw how he merited his name. This man was radiating vigor and vitality and burning within, like a ball of fire. He was indeed Shams, the Sunday. But the judge was of a different mind. You Sufis make everything too complicated. The same with philosophers and poets. Why the need for so many words? Human beings are simple creatures with simple needs. It falls upon the leaders to see to their needs and make sure they do not go astray. That requires applying the Sharia to perfection. The Sharia is like a candle, said Shams of Tabriz. It provides us with much valuable light. But let us not forget that a candle helps us to go from one place to another in the dark. If we forget where we are headed and instead concentrate on the candle, what good is it? The judge grimaced, his face closing up. I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. Entering into a discussion about the significance of the Sharia with a man whose job was to judge, and often punish, people according to the Sharia was swimming in dangerous waters. Didn't Shams know that just as I was looking for an appropriate excuse to take the dervish out of the room, I heard him say, there is a rule that applies to this situation. What rule? Asked the judge suspiciously. Shams of Tabriz straightened up, his gaze fixed as if reading from an invisible book, and he pronounced. Each and every reader comprehends the Holy Quran on a different level in tandem with the depth of his understanding. There are 4 levels of insight. The first level is the outer meaning, and it is the one that the majority of the people are content with. Next is the batin, the inner level. Third, there is the inner of the inner. And the 4th level is so deep it cannot be put into words and is therefore bound to remain indescribable. With glinting eyes Shams continued. Scholars who focus on the Sharia know the outer meaning. Sufis know the inner meaning. Saints know the inner of the inner. And as for the 4th level, that is known only by prophets and those closest to God. Are you telling me that an ordinary Sufi has a deeper grasp of the Quran than a Sharia scholar? The judge asked as he tapped his fingers on the bowl. A subtle, sardonic smile curved the dervish's mouth, but he didn't answer. Be careful, my friend, the judge said. There is a thin line between where you stand and sheer blasphemy. If there was a threat in these words, the dervish seemed not to have noticed it. What exactly is sheer blasphemy? He asked, and then with a sharp intake of breath he added, allow me to tell you a story. And here is what he told us. One day Moses was walking in the mountains on his own when he saw a shepherd in the distance. The man was on his knees with his hands spread out to the sky, praying. Moses was delighted. But when he got closer, he was equally stunned to hear the shepherd's prayer. Oh, my beloved God, I love thee more than thou can know. I will do anything for thee, just say the word. Even if thou asked me to slaughter the fattest sheep in my flock in thy name, I would do so without hesitation. Thou would roast it and put its tail fat in thy rice to make it more tasty. Moses inched toward the shepherd, listening attentively. Afterward I would wash thy feet and clean thine ears and pick thy lice for thee. That is how much I love thee. Having heard enough, Moses interrupted the shepherd, yelling, Stop, you ignorant man! What do you think you are doing? Do you think God eats rice? Do you think God has feet for you to wash? This is not prayer. It is sheer blasphemy. Dazed and ashamed, the shepherd apologized repeatedly and promised to pray as decent people did. Moses taught him several prayers that afternoon. Then he went on his way, utterly pleased with himself. But that night Moses heard a voice. It was God's. Oh, Moses, what have you done? You scolded that poor shepherd and failed to realize how dear he was to me. He might not be saying the right things in the right way, but he was sincere. His heart was pure and his intentions good. I was pleased with him. His words might have been blasphemy to your ears, but to me they were sweet blasphemy. Moses immediately understood his mistake. The next day, early in the morning, he went back to the mountains to see the shepherd. He found him praying again, except this time he was praying in the way he had been instructed. In his determination to get the prayer right, he was stammering, bereft of the excitement and passion of his earlier prayer. Regretting what he had done to him, Moses patted the shepherd's back and said, My friend, I was wrong. Please forgive me. Keep praying in your own way, that is more precious in God's eyes. The shepherd was astonished to hear this, but even deeper was his relief. Nevertheless, he did not want to go back to his old prayers. Neither did he abide by the formal prayers that Moses had taught him. He had now found a new way of communicating with God. Though satisfied and blessed in his naive devotion, he was now past that stage beyond his sweet blasphemy. So you see, don't judge the way other people connect to God, concluded Shams. To each his own way and his own prayer. God does not take us at our word. He looks deep into our hearts. It is not the ceremonies or rituals that make a difference, but whether our hearts are sufficiently pure or not. I checked the judge's face. I could see beneath his mask of absolute confidence and composure that he was clearly annoyed. Yet at the same time, being the astute man that he was, he had detected a tricky situation. If he reacted to Shams's story, he would have to take the next step and punish him for his insolence, in which case things would get serious and everybody would hear that a simple dervish had dared to confront the high judge. It was therefore better for him to pretend there was nothing to be upset about and leave it there. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky a dozen shades of crimson, punctuated now and again by dark grey clouds. In a little while, the judge rose to his feet, saying he had some important business to attend to. After giving me a slight nod and Shams of Tabriz a cold stare, he strode off. His men followed wordlessly. I am afraid the judge didn't like you much, I said when everyone had left. Shams of Tabriz brushed his hair from his face, smiling. Oh, that is quite all right. I am used to people not liking me much. I couldn't help feeling excited. I had been the master of this lodge long enough to know that it was not often such a visitor came. Tell me, dervish, I said, what brings someone like you to Baghdad? I was eager to hear his answer but also strangely fearful of it. Ella. Northampton, May 20, 2008. Belly dancers and dervishes spun in Ella's dream on the night her husband didn't come home. Her head resting on the manuscript, she watched as rough-looking warriors dined at a roadside inn, their plates piled high with delicious pies and desserts. Then she saw herself. She was searching for someone in a bustling bazaar in a citadel in a foreign country. All around her, people moved slowly, as if dancing to a tune she couldn't hear. She stopped a fat man with a drooping mustache to ask something, only she couldn't remember the question. The man looked at her blankly and hobbled away. She tried to talk to several vendors and then shoppers, but no one responded to her. At first she thought it was because she couldn't speak their language. Then she put her hand to her mouth and realized with horror that her tongue had been cut off. With increasing panic she looked around for a mirror to see her reflection and figure out if she was still the same person, but there was none in the bazaar. She started to cry and woke up to a disturbing sound, not knowing whether she still had a tongue. When Ella opened her eyes, she found Spirit frantically scratching at the back door. An animal had probably gotten onto the porch, driving the dog crazy. Skunks made him particularly nervous. The memory of his inopportune encounter with one last winter was still fresh. It had taken Ella weeks to remove that nasty odor from the dog, and even after she de-washed him in tubs of tomato juice, the smell lingered, reminiscent of burning rubber. Ella glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 2:45 in the morning. David was still not back, and perhaps he never would be. Jeanette had not returned her call, and in her pessimistic state Ella doubted she ever would. Seized by the terror of being abandoned by her husband and daughter, she opened the fridge and looked through it for a few minutes. The desire to scoop out some cherry vanilla ice cream warred with the fear of gaining weight. With no small effort, she took a step away from the fridge and slammed the door, a bit more harshly than necessary. Then Ella opened a bottle of red wine and poured herself a glass. It was good wine, light and lively, with an underlying hint of bittersweetness that she liked. Only when she was filling the second glass did it occur to her she might have opened one of David's expensive Bordeaux. She checked the label Chateau Margaux 1996. Not knowing what to make of that, she frowned at the bottle. She was too tired and too sleepy to read any more. So she decided to check her email. There, among half a dozen junk emails and a message from Michelle inquiring about how the manuscript was going, she found an email from Aziz Zahara. Dear Ella, if I may, your email found me in a village in Guatemala called Momostenango. It's one of the few places left where they still use a Mayan calendar. Right across from my hostel, there is a wish tree bedecked with hundreds of pieces of fabric of every color and pattern you can imagine. They call it the tree of the broken-hearted. Those with broken hearts write down their names on pieces of paper and tie these to the branches, praying for their hearts to be healed. I hope you won't find this too presumptuous, but after reading your email I went to the wish tree and prayed that you and your daughter solve this misunderstanding. Even a speck of love should not go unappreciated, because, as Rumi said, love is the water of life. One thing that has helped me personally in the past was to stop interfering with the people around me and getting frustrated when I couldn't change them. Instead of intrusion or passivity, may I suggest submission? Some people make the mistake of confusing submission with weakness, whereas it is anything but. Submission is a form of peaceful acceptance of the terms of the universe, including the things we are currently unable to change or comprehend. According to the Mayan calendar, today is an auspicious day. A major astrological shift is on its way, ushering in a new human consciousness. I need to hurry to send you this email before the sun sets and the day is over. May love find you when you least expect, where you least expect. Yours sincerely, Aziz. Ella shut off the laptop, moved to learn that a complete stranger in a remote corner of the world had prayed for her well-being. She closed her eyes and imagined her name written on a piece of paper tied to a wish tree, dangling like a kite in the air, free and happy. A few minutes later, she opened the kitchen door and stepped out into the backyard, enjoying the unsettling coolness of the breeze. Spirit stood beside her, uneasy and growling, constantly sniffing the air. The dog's eyes grew small, then big, and anxious, and his ears kept perking up, as if he had recognized in the distance something scary. Ella and her dog stood side by side under the late spring moon, staring into the thick, vast darkness, similarly frightened of the things moving in the dark, frightened of the unknown. The novice. Baghdad, April 1242. Bowing and scraping, I showed the judge to the door and quickly returned to the main room to collect the dirty bowls. I was surprised to find Baba Zaman and the wandering dervish in the same position as when I left them, neither one saying a word. Out of the corner of my eye, I checked them, wondering if it could be possible to carry on a conversation without talking. I lingered there as long as I could, arranging the cushions, tidying up the room, picking up the crumbs on the carpet, but after a while I ran out of reasons to stay. Half-heartedly, I dragged my feet back to the kitchen. As soon as he saw me, the cook started to rain orders. Wipe the counter, mop the floor. Wash the dishes. Scrub the stove and the walls around the grill. And when you are done, don't forget to check the mousetraps. Ever since I'd come to this lodge some 6 months ago, the cook had been riding roughshod over me. Every day he made me work like a dog and called this torture part of my spiritual training, as if washing greasy dishes could be spiritual in any way. A man of few words, the cook had one favorite mantra: cleaning is praying, praying is cleaning. If that were true, all the housewives in Baghdad would have become spiritual masters, I once dared to say. He threw a wooden spoon at my head and yelled at the top of his lungs, "Such back talk will get you nowhere, son. If you want to become a dervish, be as mute as that wooden spoon. Rebelliousness is not a good quality in a novice. Speak less, mature quicker." I hated the cook, but, more than that, I feared him. I had never disobeyed his orders. That is, until this evening. As soon as the cook turned his back, I sneaked out of the kitchen and tiptoed to the main room again, dying to learn more about the wandering dervish. Who was he? What was he doing here? He wasn't like the dervishes in the lodge. His eyes looked fierce and unruly, even when he bowed his head in modesty. There was something so unusual and unpredictable about him that it was almost frightening. I peeped through a crack in the door. At first I couldn't see anything. But soon my eyes adjusted to the semi-darkness inside the room and I could make out their faces. I heard the master ask, "Tell me, Shams of Tabriz, what brings someone like you to Baghdad? Have you seen this place in a dream?" The dervish shook his head. "No, it wasn't a dream that brought me here. It was a vision. I never have dreams." "Everybody has dreams," Baba Zaman said tenderly. "It's just that you might not remember them all the time. But that doesn't mean you don't dream." "But I do not," the dervish insisted. "It is part of a deal I made with God. You see, when I was a boy, I saw angels and watched the mysteries of the universe unfold before my eyes. When I told this to my parents, they weren't pleased and told me to stop dreaming. When I confided in my friends, they, too, said I was a hopeless dreamer. I tried talking to my teachers, but their response was no different. Finally I understood that whenever people heard something unusual, they called it a dream. I began to dislike the word and all that it represented." Upon saying this, the dervish paused as if he had heard a sudden sound. Then the strangest thing happened. He stood up, straightened his spine, and slowly, deliberately began to walk toward the door, all the while looking in my direction. It was as if he somehow knew I was spying on them. It was as if he could see through the wooden door. My heart pounded like mad. I wanted to run back to the kitchen but couldn't see how. My arms, my legs, my whole body froze. Through and beyond the door, the dark eyes of Shams of Tabriz were fixed upon me. As terrified as I was, I also felt a tremendous amount of energy rushing through my body. He approached, put his hand on the door handle, but just when I thought he was about to open the door and catch me, he stopped. I couldn't see his face from this close and had no idea what had changed his mind. We waited like that for an unbearably long minute. Then he turned his back, and as he paced away from the door, he continued with his story. When I got a little older, I asked God to take away my ability to dream, so that every time I encountered him, I would know I wasn't dreaming. He agreed. He took them all away. That's why I never dream. Shams of Tabriz now stood by the open windows across the room. Outside, there was a light drizzle, and he watched it pensively before he said, God took away my ability to dream. But to compensate for that loss, he allowed me to interpret the dreams of others. I am a dream interpreter. I expected Baba Zaman not to believe this nonsense and to scold him, as he scolds me all the time. But instead the master nodded respectfully and said, You seem to be an unusual person. Tell me, what can I do for you? I don't know. Actually, I was hoping you could tell me that. What do you mean? Asked the master, sounding puzzled. For almost 40 years, I have been a wandering dervish. I am skilled in the ways of nature, although the ways of society are still alien to me. If necessary, I can fight like a wild animal, but I myself cannot hurt anyone. I can name the constellations in the sky, identify the trees in the forests, and read like an open book the types of people the Almighty has created in His image. Shams paused briefly and waited as the master lit an oil lamp. Then he continued. One of the rules says, you can study God through everything and everyone in the universe, because God is not confined in a mosque, synagogue, or church. But if you are still in need of knowing where exactly His abode is, there is only one place to look for Him, in the heart of a true lover. There is no one who has lived after seeing Him, just like there is no one who has died after seeing Him. Whoever finds Him will remain with Him forever. In that dim, flickering light, Shams of Tabriz seemed even taller, his hair falling to his shoulders in disorderly waves. But knowledge is like brackish water at the bottom of an old vase unless it flows somewhere. For years I prayed to God for a companion to share the knowledge accumulated inside me. Finally, in a vision in Samarkand, I've been told I should come to Baghdad to fulfill my destiny. I understand that you know the name of my companion and his whereabouts and will tell me, if not now, then later. Outside, the night had settled, and a wedge of moonlight streamed in through the open windows. I realized how late it was. The cook must have been looking for me. But I didn't care. For once it felt good to break the rules. I don't know what kind of answer you are asking of me, murmured the master. But if there is a piece of information I am destined to reveal, I know it will happen in due time. Until then you can stay here with us. Be our guest. Upon hearing this, the wandering dervish bowed humbly and gratefully to kiss Baba Zaman's hand. That is when the master asked that bizarre question, you say you are ready to deliver all your knowledge to another person. You want to hold the truth in your palm as if it were a precious pearl and offer it to someone special. But opening up someone's heart to spiritual light is no small task for a human being. You're stealing God's thunder. What are you willing to pay in return? For as long as I live, I will never forget the answer the dervish gave then. Raising an eyebrow, he said firmly, I am willing to give my head. I flinched, feeling a cold shiver travel down my spine. When I put my eye to the crack again, I noticed that the master looked shaken by the answer as well. Perhaps we have done enough talking for today. Baba Zaman exhaled a sigh. You must be tired. Let me call the young novice. He will show you to your bed and provide clean sheets and a glass of milk. Now Shams of Tabriz turned toward the door, and I felt down to my bones that he was gazing at me again. More than that. It was as if he were looking through and into me, studying the pits and peaks of my soul, inspecting secrets that were hidden even from me. Perhaps he was involved with black magic or had been trained by Harut and Marut, the two angels of Babylon that the Quran warned us against. Or else he possessed supernatural talents that helped him to see through doors and walls. Either way he scared me. "No need to call the novice," he said, his voice attaining a higher pitch. "I've a feeling he is nearby and has already heard us." I let out a gasp so loud it might have woken the dead in their graves. In utter panic I jumped to my feet and scurried into the garden, seeking refuge in the dark. But an unpleasant surprise was awaiting me there. "So there you are, you little rascal!" yelled the cook as he ran toward me with a broom in his hand. "You are in big trouble, son, big trouble." I jumped aside and managed to duck the broom at the last minute. "Come here or I'll break your legs!" the cook shouted behind me, puffing. But I didn't. Instead I dashed out of the garden as fast as an arrow. While the face of Shams of Tabriz shimmered before my eyes, I ran along the winding trail that connected the lodge to the main road, and even after I had gotten far away, I couldn't stop running. My heart pounding, my throat dried up, I ran until my knees gave out and I could run no more. Ella. Northampton, May 21, 2008. Braced for a quarrel, David came home early the next morning, only to find Ella asleep in bed with Sweet Blasphemy open on her lap and an empty glass of wine by her side. He took a step toward her to pull her blanket up a little and make sure she was snugly covered, but then he changed his mind. 10 minutes later, Ella woke up. She wasn't surprised to hear him in the bathroom taking a shower. Her husband could flirt with other women, and apparently even spend the night with them, but he would rather not take his morning shower anywhere other than his own bathroom. When David finished and walked back through the room, Ella pretended to be asleep, thus saving him from having to explain his absence. Less than an hour later, both her husband and the kids had left, and Ella was in the kitchen alone. Life seemed to have resumed its regular course. She opened her favorite cookbook, Culinary Artistry Made Plain and Easy, and after considering several options chose a fairly demanding menu that would keep her busy all afternoon. Clam chowder with saffron, coconut, and oranges. Pasta baked with mushrooms, fresh herbs, and 5 cheeses. Rosemary-infused veal spareribs with vinegar and roasted garlic. Lime-bathed green bean and cauliflower salad. Then she decided on a dessert, warm chocolate souffle. There were many reasons that Ella liked cooking. Creating a delicious meal out of ordinary ingredients was not only gratifying and fulfilling but also strangely sensual. But more than that, she enjoyed cooking because it was something she was really good at. Besides, it quieted her mind. The kitchen was the one place in her life where she could avoid the outside world altogether and stop the flow of time within herself. For some people sex might have the same effect, she imagined, but that always required two, whereas to cook all one needed was time, care, and a bag of groceries. People who cooked on TV programs made it sound as if cooking was about inspiration, originality, and creativity. Their favorite word was experimenting. Ella disagreed. Why not leave experimenting to scientists and quirkiness to artists? Cooking was about learning the basics, following the instructions, and being respectful of the wisdom of ages. All you had to do was use time-honored traditions, not experiment with them. Cooking skills came from customs and conventions, and although it was clear that the modern age belittled such things, there was nothing wrong with being traditional in the kitchen. Ella also cherished her daily routines. Every morning, at roughly the same time, the family had breakfast. Every weekend they went to the same mall, and on the first Sunday of every month they had a dinner party with their neighbors. Because David was a workaholic with little time on his hands, Ella was in charge of everything at home, managing the finances, caring for the house, reupholstering the furniture, running errands, arranging the kids' schedules and helping them with their homework, and so on. On Thursdays she went to the Fusion Cooking Club, where the members merged the cuisines of different countries and freshened up age-old recipes with new spices and ingredients. Every Friday she spent hours at the farmers' market, chatting with the farmers about their products, inspecting a jar of low-sugar organic peach jam, or explaining to another shopper how best to cook baby portobello mushrooms. Whatever she hadn't been able to find, she picked up from the Whole Foods market on the way home. Then, on Saturday evenings, David took Ella out to a restaurant, usually Thai or Japanese, and if they weren't too tired or drunk or simply not in the mood when they came home, they would have sex. Brief kisses and tender moves that exuded less passion than compassion. Once their most reliable connection, sex had lost its allure quite a while ago. Sometimes they went for weeks without making love. Ella found it odd that sex had once been so important in her life, and now when it was gone, she felt relieved, almost liberated. By and large she was fine with the idea of a long-married couple gradually abandoning the plane of physical attraction for a more reliable and stable way of relating. The only problem was that David hadn't abandoned sex as much as he had abandoned sex with his wife. She had never confronted him openly about his affairs, not even hinting of her suspicions. The fact that none of their close friends knew anything made it easier for her to feign ignorance. There were no scandals, no embarrassing coincidences, nothing to set tongues wagging. She didn't know how he managed it, given the frequency of his couplings with other women, particularly with his young assistants, but her husband handled things deftly and quietly. However, infidelity had a smell. That much Ella knew. If there was a chain of events, Ella couldn't tell which came first and which followed later. Had her loss of interest in sex been the cause of her husband's cheating, or was it the other way round? Had David cheated on her first, and then she neglected her body and lost her sexual desire? Either way the outcome remained the same, the glow between them, the light that had helped them to navigate the uncharted waters of marriage, keeping their desire afloat, even after 3 kids and 20 years, was simply not there anymore. For the next 3 hours, her mind was filled with thoughts while her hands were restless. She chopped tomatoes, minced garlic, sautéed onions, simmered sauce, grated orange peels, and kneaded dough for a loaf of whole wheat bread. That last was based on the golden advice David's mother had given her when they got engaged. Nothing reminds a man of home like the smell of freshly baked bread, she had said. Never buy your bread. Bake it yourself, honey. It will work wonders. Working the entire afternoon, Ella set an exquisite table with matching napkins, scented candles, and a bouquet of yellow and orange flowers so bright and striking they looked almost artificial. For the final touch, she added sparkly napkin rings. When she was done, the dining table resembled those found in stylish home magazines. Tired but satisfied, she turned on the kitchen TV to the local news. A young therapist had been stabbed in her apartment, an electrical short had caused a fire in a hospital, and 4 high school students had been arrested for vandalism. She watched the news, shaking her head at the endless dangers looming in the world. How could people like Aziz Zahara find the desire and courage to travel the less developed parts of the globe when even the suburbs in America weren't safe anymore? Ella found it puzzling that an unpredictable and impenetrable world could drive people like her back into their houses, but had almost the opposite effect on someone like Aziz, inspiring him to embark on adventures far off the beaten track. The Rubinsteins sat at a picture-perfect table at 7:30 p.m., the burning candles giving the dining room a sacred air. An outsider watching them might assume they were a perfect family, as graceful as the wisps of smoke slowly dissolving in the air. Even Jeanette's absence didn't tarnish the picture. They ate while Orly and Avi prattled on about the day's events at school. For once Ella felt grateful to them for being so chatty and noisy and covering up the silence that would otherwise have rested heavily between her and her husband. Out of the corner of her eye, Ella watched David jab his fork into a cauliflower and chew slowly. Her gaze dropped to his thin, pale lips and pearl-white teeth, the mouth she knew so well and had kissed so many times. She visualized him kissing another woman. For some reason the rival who appeared in her mind's eye was not David's young secretary but a big-bosomed version of Susan Sarandon. Athletic and confident, she showed off her breasts in a tight dress and wore high-heeled, knee-high red leather boots, her face shiny, almost iridescent with too much makeup. Ella imagined David kissing this woman with haste and hunger, not at all the way he chewed his cauliflower at the family table. It was then and there, while having her culinary artistry made plain and easy dinner and imagining the woman her husband was having an affair with, that something inside Ella snapped. She understood with chilling clarity and calm that despite her inexperience and timidity, one day she would abandon it all.